Bushcrafters, welcome to another video series from West Texas Bushcraft. This one's going to be a multi-part series, and since we're hitting the basics, what I wanted to talk about was probably the most important tool on your person or in your pack. And it is the most, well, I'd say probably the most controversial subject on the internet as far as bushcrafting is concerned, and that would be knives. So diving right on in, because we got a lot to talk about even though it's just the basics. There's so much to knives that it's not even funny. So I got the good old chalkboard here, and I'll ask you right away to forgive me for my drawing skills because I am not an artist. So first thing I want to talk about with knives is there's two major different types of knives that you want to look at for carrying on you or putting in your pack for use as your primary knife or your backup knife. It's a good idea to carry two. And you have your fixed blade knives, and you have also your folding knives. And there's everything that kind of branches out from there. That's your two basic kinds, fixed blade and folders. And so talking about fixed blades here, that probably has the most information on it. Just about everybody that's involved in some sort of bushcraft or survival always recommends a full tang knife. And if you're asking yourself what the tang is, you have two major parts to your knife. You have the blade, and this is the tang. A lot of times it's referred to as handle, but really when it comes right down to it, the handle is the all-encompassed portion of it. That would be, this is the guts of the handle, which is the tang. This normally will be wrapped in some sort of rubber or plastic or completely encompassed in wood or something like that. You can get those in plates along the front where you can see the metal exposed on the spine and the belly and on the butt side of it. Or you can get some that they call encapsulated handles, and those are really hard to tell because a lot of times the manufacturers won't tell you exactly what kind of tang is in that handle. So when you see a encapsulated handle, you don't really know what's in there unless you're talking to some sort of knife expert at the shops, and then most of the time that's not what you're going to get. So you have to kind of go with your gut feeling on that. But this would be a full tang knife. This is, if you get the handle without anything on it, that's what is referred to as a skeletonized knife, which is basically just that. It's just the skeleton of it. It's the blade and the tang. You can finish the handle yourself. You can put whatever you want on there. A lot of people will buy those and put paracord on that handle. They'll wrap it or braid it on there or something like that. And you got a little extra cordage, plus it pads that a little bit in your grip, so that way it's less slippery and you got a little bit more padding when you're really working on something. Full tang knives are good for all different kinds of things. You can dig with them, you can pry with them, you can actually chop wood with them. If you get them heavy enough, the things can also almost replace an axe when you're processing wood and things like that. So this is probably the most preferred one. But then again, you also have your 3/4 tang knife. You got the blade, and there's two different kinds of 3/4 tangs that I've seen, and this is where it starts to get a little bit hairy. You can have a rat tail type of 3/4 tang, which basically is like this, and then of course you got your handle that comes out around there, and it gets its name 3/4 tang because most of the time the very tip of that tang is going to go only 3/4 of the way inside the handle. Sometimes that's a complete squared off piece, and sometimes it's rat tail. And if you're familiar with the K-bar knives, that's the ones that the Marines carry. It's the one with the leather wrapped handle, the different size, kind of like leather washers. It's typical military knife. That knife, some people call it full tang simply because that tang will go all the way out to the end, and some people will call it a 3/4 tang because it is the blade. Then you have the finger guards, and then from this point forward there is like a long pin that is similar to a bolt, and then they start wrapping the handle with leather. Normally I wouldn't recommend those, but the military's been using that forever, and I have one. I'll show you that in the next video, but it serves its purpose. It does a great job. It's really tough. They wouldn't continue to make the things if they were garbage. But that's part of your controversy right there. Now, you got your blade here, and then you got this little stud coming in here. Sometimes this will have metal over the top, or it'll be widened at that point, or be made a little bit thicker with the metal. Sometimes it'll continue out to a full tang, but a lot of times when you see those, this will be something sort of like what you see in your kitchen, a kitchen knife. That would be kind of a half tang knife. Those, I really don't want to recommend those to anyone unless your handle is made of metal and bolted on. That way, because you'll see right here the weakness, of course, this is your biggest stress point on any knife. It's right there where the blade meets the tang or the handle. That's your biggest stress point, because you're not going to be able to help yourself. You're going to have to pry with some things with that. But with this kind of setup, if that's a wooden handle, you probably pop that tang straight through that plastic or wood or rubber or anything like that over time. So those are the ones that are a little scary. I'd probably stay away from that when you're looking at fixed blade knives, unless it has some sort of metal handle. But then, if it has a metal handle, you're going to wind up with a really heavy knife probably, or it's going to be cheap metal, and that could probably fail. So we've kind of talked about tangs a little bit and what they are and what purpose they serve, and it's just mainly just something to stick the handle on. Now, talking about tangs and prying with these things, it's good to note that you never use your knife for what it's not intended for. So if you do have to pry stuff, and you will probably have to pry stuff, if that thing starts to flex, stop. Work it a little bit differently, figure out some other way to do it, because the last thing you want to do is break your blade and really hurt yourself, because if you're out there in the middle of nowhere, that alone could put you in a survival situation you don't want to be in. So be very careful when working with these knives, especially if you're trying one out for the first time, until you get to where you can trust the thing. It's like a person, you got to get to know it. Then you can trust it, or you can't trust it, one of the two. So, now that's the overview of the tangs. And you have all different kinds of knives. You have the big, huge survival knives that have a hollow handle with all the different little survival gear, junky stuff that goes inside. You have skinning knives, which the skinning knife is typically going to be usually a shorter blade. Sometimes they're longer if it's a good hunter, but the longer ones will usually have some sort of shape like this to it. Well, maybe not quite that curved. A lot of times they'll be shaped a little bit more of a belly on the blade, so that way you can pierce the skin of the animal and then just slide the knife up, and as that slides through, it's just cutting right through. And then, like a typical hunter knife may have just a little bit of an upswing on the end of that blade there, and then come out and then around. And each different kind of blade serves its purpose. Most of the time when you're going to select your knife, you want a good all-around kind of knife. A good, decent sized blade. You go real long, they get to be heavy and cumbersome. You get too short, sometimes you can't do some of the bigger jobs. So some good mid-range knife usually does pretty good. So you usually want something with a fairly straight blade down here with a nice drop point on it, or a drop point coming from this direction, like so. because it makes for good self-defense. It makes for a good all-around knife. Now, however long you want your blade to be, that's strictly up to you. A lot of the different survival type knives you'll see will have a serration right here. Personally, I don't really care for those, but they have come in handy for me in the past. Where the serration can make you or break you is if you're out there and you're having to make weapons like making bows or spears or arrows or anything like that, where you got to do some kind of fine carving work or whittling work on that. The serrations can sometimes get in the way, because that's usually where you're doing your fine detail cutting, is down there at the base of the blade, so you can really work it and it's a good pivot point. These are good for sawing wood or sawing through bone or anything like that that's a little harder, that you don't want to just whittle away with. But in a future video I can show you how to cut down a pretty decent sized branch with just a straight fine blade on your knife and kind of get away from the serration. But that's also personal preference too. You'll have a million people out there say, oh, serrated edges is the way to go. And you'll also have another million people say, no, fine edge is the way to go. So it's up to you. Try them out. See what you like. Now, I did mention something about the good old survival type knives. There's all different kinds. Most of the survival knives that you'll see are going to be the big giant one. It's got that big old long blade on it, the huge finger guard, and then it's got the hollow handle with the cap on the end that's usually got a compass in it. You'll have a saw blade built into the top, maybe some serrated edges back here. Most of the time it's a fine edge. But the thing that scares me about these is there's two main different kinds of these survival knives that you can get. You go cheap, you get cheap. I'll tell you that right now. Everybody knows me, I'm all about budget, so you can get good stuff for a really good price, for a good low price. But when you start looking at these things and you see one that's 8, 10, 12, 20, 30 bucks even, most of the time what you're going to get when you get one of these is this, and this is not one piece. Of course, this is hollow, but that blade is attached right behind that finger guard with this little stud, which is no more than a very short bolt with a nut right on it. So you can just see right now how that could fail very, very easy. So if you decide to go with one of these, by all means, if they'll allow you to get in the packaging or have one that's open already, empty the contents out of it and look down inside and see if that little bolt's there, that little stud, because if it is, put that thing away. Don't bother with it, because that, I guarantee you, at some point will fail. And you don't want that to happen, because when it's going to fail is when you're sawing something or you're really working this real hard, and with that big, huge, heavy blade, you're going to hurt yourself. So you don't want that. Now, you can get the same exact survival knife that is made a little bit better quality. It'll be just this, blade, handle, all one piece. You can get that where it's welded on there, or it's been machined, all one piece of metal and hollowed out, or something like that, where this has been pressed out or smithed out some way, and then the handle had been hollowed out. So that's going to be a lot more stable. If you go that route, I recommend it. But then it's a huge blade. It may be a little cumbersome to work with, and all this, if you're buying it for the stuff in the handle or to stuff the handle with your own stuff, man, that's one of the reasons I showed the Altoid tins kit, because you can get more stuff in the tin if you want to go ultra small survival than you can get in this stuff. And the stuff they usually put in these are really cheap stuff that, you know, okay, I'm just going to say it here. It's Chinese made stuff that's pennies on the dollar, costs nothing to make, and I really, really wouldn't want to have to rely on such a thing if I wound up in some sort of survival situation. So, now it's time for a little homework. Go out there and research the different types of knives on the internet. Look at your skinners, look at your hunters, and then even look at good folding knives. A good folding knife is almost just as good as a fixed blade knife. I have a nice Buck 110 folding blade that I've actually gone out with it on several occasions without my fixed blade, and it does just as good. So we'll talk about folding knives a little bit more on this next video when I'm showing you all the different kinds of knives that I have, some recommendations, and just to give you a better idea rather than looking at a chalkboard drawing. So go out there, do a little research on knives on your own, look at the different prices, go out to the stores, price those there, feel the things, heft the things in your hands, see how they feel to you, and then come back to the website for part 2. I hope this was informative. Now thank you for stopping by. So go get dirty.